Today's Halloween look is this wicked witch. It's a very theatrical witch and I absolutely love it. This is my good friend Rihanna. The last time we did her makeup was her wedding makeup and it was very different. I'm going to start by cleansing Rihanna's skin using some witch hazel. Witch hazel is an astringent, so it takes away the oils, which means you can apply glue and prosthetics to the skin without it moving or being disrupted by any oils. Rihanna has incredible eyebrows already, however I want to completely reshape them, so I'm going to use some Elmer's glue just to flatten them ever so slightly. I'm not worrying too much because I am going to be applying something over the top to completely eradicate them. You can also use Prose glue just to flatten them based on what we are going to be applying over the top, but I'm using Elmer's because it's really easy to remove. You can use warm water and it comes away perfectly. So I'm just using a small amount on a spoolie brush to comb that through. It does go on purple, but it dries completely clear. Once you've applied it, use your fingers to press the brows flat to the skin. So to completely eradicate the brows, I'm going to be using a small amount of this bald cap, which I got from the Makeup Armoury. This one is by Krylon. It's a vinyl bald cap. It's very thin and stretchy, which makes it great for this area. I also got my Prose adhesive from the Makeup Armoury. They are great for all of your Halloween or prosthetic supplies. So I'm taking a cotton bud and I'm placing a small border around the eyebrows using the Prose glue. As I said earlier, you can use this glue to press down your brows underneath this material. However, I want it to be easy for Rihanna to remove, so just applying a border means there's less of the glue to have to take off the skin. Once you've applied this and it goes completely clear, then you know you're ready to apply your bald cap material. From the bottom of the cap, I've cut away 2 small sections, one for each eyebrow. Using both hands, I'm stretching 4 corners before pressing that over the border of glue. If you can't do all 4 at once, just make sure 2 of your corners are pressed down, then you can free up one hand to help stretch and press the bald cap material into place. Don't worry if you get any rippling of the material, as long as you've not pressed it into place hard to begin with, you should be able to lift, re-stretch and replace. I like to cut away any excess material just so it's not flapping around in my client's face, but I leave a little bit of a border for me to hold on to so that when I blend away I've got something to pull at the same time. To blend away the edges, I'm going to use some acetone. Again, you can get some acetone from the Makeup Armoury. And I'm going to use a cotton bud and a rolling motion to blend away the seams. Here at the top, I'm rolling anti-clockwise and pushing away at the same time. That way it's making sure that the material is going as flat as possible to the skin. And you can also use a brush if you prefer. I got this witch nose from the Makeup Armoury. I love this one because it is so realistic. It's like super soft. It's quite stretchy as you can see. It's encapsulated with baldies, which means you can blend it away with acetone the same way we did with the vinyl across the eyebrows. We're going to use the Prose glue over Rihanna's nose and also on the prosthetic, and then when they both go clear, we'll adhere them together. This piece was not modelled on Rihanna's nose, so we are going to have to do our best to make it fit Rihanna's petite nose. If you watch some of my previous videos, you'll see that when you apply a prosthetic piece, often you will offer it up to the face, dust around it, which gives you a border, and then you can apply your glue within that border. Now the glue has gone completely clear, I'm very softly and gently applying the nose on the skin so that it's light enough that if I need to adjust it, I can still take it off. Try not to allow your flashing to adhere before you've kind of got it in place. A little tip is to ask for an extra hand if you can. If you've got 4 hands, they're always better than 2. Someone can always hold the nose ever so slightly away or hold your edging up just while you make sure you've got your glue in the right place. It is a little bit more fiddly when you're doing it as a one-man band. Nevertheless, it can be done. Once you've got your flashing adhered to the skin, use some acetone with a cotton bud and a rolling motion again to blend away your seams. Roll towards your piece but pull away from the piece at the same time. That way you'll get a really nice flat edge. Think of it as a hill. You want the hill to come down almost to nothing, so you want that edge to be as thin as possible on the skin. Rihanna thought it would be fun to include the removal process, so at the end of the video I have included a small time lapse of Rihanna and I removing all the makeup. So this is the nose piece. It was made slightly on the wonk, but actually I'm really pleased about it because I feel like it's going to add to the character. Next up we have a foam latex chin. I would have ideally had the same material as the nose, but I couldn't get one in time and this was in the drawer, so I thought, you know what, I am going to apply it. I didn't have any Prose cream to do the edge blending, but I know a lot of you won't bother with that, so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it anyway. So I'm applying some of the liquid Prosade, which I've used on all the other material on the face, and I've applied this to Rihanna's chin. Again, you can dust around the prosthetic before you apply it to give you a border, but I'm just winging it. So this is the chin piece. The edging is a lot thicker than the nose, and if you want to see how to disguise it, I will link my other tutorial using a foam latex piece on the top corner for you. I'm going to use my Supra Colour palette by Krylon to mix up a green that I think will work well for this witch look. I got this palette from the Makeup Armory. Colouring the skin is one of my favourite parts, especially when you're using a bunch of different materials on the skin, because at first it looks a bit like a patchwork quilt until you have coloured the whole look as one, and then you can really start to see it come together, which is exactly what happened with my Frankenstein look. I kept looking at Billy and laughing because he looked like a tooth. He looked like a walking advertisement for a dental company. But as soon as we got that base layer down, you could see straight away it was Frankenstein. Here I'm applying a thin layer of the Prosade glue to the chin because it is a foam latex piece. It would just absorb anything you put on it, so you almost need to seal it in place. Then once it's dry, I'll go in with a powder before colouring it with the green cream base colour that I'm using here. You can of course use paints if you prefer. I just like to work with creams. So now the glue's dried, I'm going in with a translucent powder. The one I put aside and I constantly use just for special effects makeup is the Vichy Derma Blend. It's a translucent powder. I just really like this one because it's super finely milled. Once you've dusted that on, you can then go in with your cream base makeup. And because you have sealed it before this, it won't change colour. You'll find that when it absorbs into the sponge, it tends to get darker. But if you apply almost like a waterproof base to it, it won't change colour. As I said before, I've not gone around the edging of the foam latex, so you will still see the visible lines. We honestly, I don't know how we got through this because we just can never stop laughing. We can't take anything seriously. So as I was saying, you will still see the edging, but overall it's still a very effective piece to use, even if you don't have the cream Prosade to disguise the edging. I didn't want to use a cream over the lids because I didn't want it to crease too much, so I'm using a very small amount of the Pro Air Hybrid Waterproof Green Paint, and this dries super quick. I tend to avoid putting this directly around the eyes usually just because it can be a little bit fumey. It smells like apples, but if you get too close to the eyes when they're open, it can sting a little, so I'm only using this very lightly on the top lid. You can see I'm using a very light hand just to give it a base coat. Now I want to go in with a base layer of translucent powder to kind of set everything in place. The first layer does sometimes remove a little bit of the cream. However, we are going to go in with a little bit of a second layer just in the areas that it does go a bit patchy in. But you want to apply this if you want it to last. Sometimes I'll mix a layer of cream and then face paint and then cream, and that really locks everything into place and it gives you a really intense colour payoff. But today I'm just working with creams. So here I've dipped my bristles back into a small amount of the cream colour base and stippling it back over the top. You'll see it looks slightly more mattified this time because there is powder underneath. Then once again I'm going back over with my powder to press that into place, and you'll see that it's a lot more opaque this time. Moving on to the eyebrows, I wanted to do something very similar to my Disney Beggar Woman, which was a Disney Beggar Woman witch prior to actually changing into a witch. So this is almost like her alter ego. So I wanted to really base it on that look with the theatrical transformation of the face. On that one I used a lot of highlight and contour to transform Charlie's face, but obviously we'll be using flesh tones to achieve that, whereas this time we're still going to use the same technique of highlighting and contouring, but we're going to be using green tones. So for the brows in this tutorial I'm using black paint. I'm using the one by Superstar Paints because it's so black, and I'm using a small tiny eyeliner brush, which is actually a craft brush, so it's even smaller than an eyeliner brush, to use feather-light strokes to make them look more hairy, but obviously it is theatrical so it doesn't need to be perfect. Just use a light hand and really give them an over-exaggerated arch. Next up we're moving on to the frown lines and the wrinkles of the face. Once again, we're keeping this very theatrical, so we want to be using a mix of black, then greens, and also like a creamy tone. So just use a mix of your Krylon palette to create the shades that you need to make those highlight and contour colours, thinking about the fact that your witch is green. So I start off with the wavy lines across the forehead to create that kind of old age, or rather angry finish to the forehead, but in a very theatrical sense, so go over the top with it. Once you've applied black, just give it a little bit of a soften using a pencil brush. Then in between those lines, you want to apply your lighter shade, which is that creamy highlight. And once that's in place, we're then going to move on to eyeshadow. I'm using this eyeshadow palette by Certify, and I'm using a mix of the greens and black to create shadow around the furrow lines on the forehead. This is going to create the appearance that the lines are a little bit more three-dimensional. So the mix of the black and green is going directly over the black lines that we've already created, and we're also then going to go into a white eyeshadow, and this is going over the top of the highlight shade that we've applied. It's not going over the entire lines, just on the areas that we want to be most prominent. Then we're going to dip in just to the moss green shade, and this is going slightly above the black line that we've created and also below it. And again, this is going to start to make those lines look a bit more three-dimensional. Take some of your highlighter cream shade and apply this just above the eyebrow bone. This will make this area look a bit fuller. Don't forget to then go in with your powder shade to set it in place and also enhance any of the areas that you need to stand out a little bit more. Underneath the brows, we're going to enhance with the darker green shade. Creating a shadow here will make the brow look slightly heavier at the front. Then we're also going to make the eyelid look a bit heavier. If you watch my Disney Beggar Woman tutorial, you'll see that you need to be a bit softer with the approach when you're doing this to make the lid genuinely look heavy. Because you're using flesh tones with that one, you need it to be more realistic. When you're creating something like this and it's green, you don't need to be as soft in your approach. You can be a bit more theatrical and a bit heavier with it. Here I've added a light amount of the cream shade on the brow bone, and I'm tapping over that with some white eyeshadow. I'm also going to take that white shadow over the lid space so that when Rihanna's eyes are open, it makes this part of the eyelid look a bit bigger, which then in turn makes the outside of the lid look heavier. I'm now adding highlighter to the creases around the bridge of the nose and also just underneath that heavy brow. And then again setting that in place and blending it slightly with the white eyeshadow. Taking some black paint on a eyeliner brush, I am lining the outside lid, extending it past Rihanna's natural lid space, and this is connecting with the outer corner of the heavy eyeshadow lid that we've created. I've not been too neat about the creases because we're actually going to go in with some black eyeshadow shortly, and there's no point in sitting there doing lots of blending when you're not going to see too much of it. Also, I'm only taking this eyeliner halfway across Rihanna's lid. I'm now dipping into a little bit of the black and the moss green eyeshadow and running that down the sides of the nose to create a deeper shadow. Off camera on the right side, I did some of the under eye, and then on this side I'm just going to show you how I did that. So I'm creating a curved shape to create a fake bag underneath the eyes. Initially I lay this down with a cream colour and then I go over it with black eyeshadow just to soften it. If you're not very confident at getting the shape straight off the bat, you could go in with a green eyeshadow as a base. That way if it goes wrong, you could probably go over it with some of the cream base makeup to hide it again. Here I'm just creating some theatrical aging lines around the eyes using the black and the cream colour highlight before setting that in place with a little bit of the white eyeshadow and then using some black to blend out to create a bit more of a shadow. On the bag itself, you want to highlight the outer edge, so stipple on some of the lighter highlight shade and then pat over that with a little bit of the white eyeshadow. We're also going to darken the bag on the inner corner of the eye that comes out like a bit of a triangle. Just use the black eyeshadow to blend on top of the cream that you've already got on the skin, and this will create a nice blend. And then you want to go over that and add the highlight shade, and this will just accentuate that kind of puffy appearance to this area of the eyes. I really love creating the kind of theatrical highlight and contour because it's just so transformative and it's just very playful looking. It doesn't have to be too realistic, but it's so effective. Going back to the eyes, we're adding black to the outer third of the mobile lid. This will help to make the front half of the eyelid look bigger, and in turn it will help to make the hood of the eye look heavier. Along the waterline, I'm applying Black Kohl Pencil by Zoeva, and then I'm applying some black mascara. We're not going to apply any eyelashes or anything, we just want to keep it pretty simple there. I'm also going to apply some black underneath the lower eyelash line. Going back to the face, we're now going to start to add some highlight and contour to the nose. So I'm starting with the highlight shade. I'm accentuating the wart on the side of the nose with the highlighter and also the sides of the nostrils. We're also going to take the highlighter down the centre of the nose. Again, not trying to make the nose look straighter because I really quite like that it is slightly wonky. So I'm just going to follow the shape of the bridge and then also accentuate the opposite nostril before going in with some of the black and green mixed together around the sides of the nose to create some depth and shadow. As you can see on the right side of the face, I've already drawn some lines around the lips, so I'm going to do the same on the left side, starting with the black paint and then going in with the lighter cream, and then I'm going to go in with the eyeshadow just to set those in place but also to soften them. Don't soften them too much because otherwise they won't be as visible. Just referencing back to my Disney Beggar Witch lady, that one you need to be a lot softer in the approach because again it needs to look a bit more realistic, whereas with this kind of look you can be as theatrical as you want. I've painted Rihanna's lips black and now I'm going in with some of the black eyeshadow mixed with the moss green on a small brush, and I'm using this to kind of contour down the sides of the cheeks towards the chin. This is going to make the face look more drawn in and slightly older. As I keep saying, the more theatrical you get with these kind of lines, the highlight and the shadow, the more effective it's going to look. So you can see I've created two darker stripes down the cheek and now I'm going in with a lighter shade through the centre, and you'll start to see this almost looks a bit like a fold of skin. So really work this into the cream and start to blend it, but try not to lose those shapes too much because otherwise you'll lose the effect if you blend it too much. So always think about softening but not completely blending away. So once you've repeated that on the opposite side of the face, we'll be almost nearly there. I bought a cheap costume and hat off of Amazon. I have this wig from the tutorial that I used for the Disney Beggar Woman. I also used this wig for my Gamora look. To pull the look together, I'm going to use some of the Necessary Evil mouth effects in Down Brown, which I got from the Makeup Armory, and as you can see, it really pulls the look together. A huge thank you to Rihanna for being my model because she was fantastic.